Listen, no one single person is important in this building. Doesn't matter if I'm here or not, service is going to start. How's everybody doing? Good. I'm going to put my phone on silent while I'm standing up here real fast. I am not prepared. This is why Josh was telling me to hurry up. All right. Well, if you guys will stand with me. Actually, you're going to stand. I'm going to sit. This morning, I want to start with a verse that's in Psalms 148. It says, praise the Lord from the heavens, praise him from the skies, praise him all his angels, praise him all the armies of heaven, praise him sun and moon, praise him all you twinkling stars, praise him skies above, praise him vapors high above the clouds. Let every created thing give praise to the Lord. For he issued his command, and they came into being. He set them in place forever and ever, and his decree will never be revoked. Praise the Lord from the earth, you creatures of ocean depths, fire and hail, snow and clouds, wind and weather that obey him, mountains and all hills, fruit trees and all cedars, wild animals and all livestock, small scurrying animals and birds, kings of the earth and all people, rulers and judges of the earth, young men and young women, old men and children, let them all praise the name of the Lord, for his name is very great. His glory towers over the earth and heaven. I just imagine the author of this Psalms composing this and just thinking through all the things that exist out there. I mean, that list is like so detailed in some spaces and so general in some spaces, from not just the animals, but like the small scurrying animals and the big wild animals and the mountains and the vapors above the clouds and the kings and the judges and the rulers. Because everything that exists, God created. And I think there's times in the state of the world that we live in where the lack of control that we feel, the helplessness and the decisions that are being made and the way that things are happening and how things are going, that it feels like chaos and stirs up that anxiety or that fear. And it's a good reminder to bring our attention and our praise back to the God that created us, that created all things, the God that the wind and the waves obey. And so this morning, the theme that's kind of threaded through our songs is just that, is that we have a great God who is faithful and good and loves us. And that praise not only is due to him for that, but also praise reminds our hearts that he is who he says he is, that he is in control, that he is good, that he is faithful. So wherever you're at this morning, I invite you just to still your heart for a moment. Remind your soul that God is the creator of all things.
All creatures of our God and King, lift up your voice and let us sing. Alleluia, alleluia. Thou burning sun with golden beam, thou silver moon with softer gleam. Oh, praise him, oh, praise him. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Thou rushing wind that art so strong, ye clouds that sail in heaven along. Oh, praise him. others take your part. Oh, sing ye hallelujah, ye who long pain and sorrow bear. Praise God and on him cast your care. Oh, praise him, oh, praise him. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Let all things their Creator bless, and worship him in humbleness. Oh, praise him, hallelujah. Praise, praise the Father, praise the Son. Praise, praise the Spirit, three in one. Oh, praise him, oh, praise him. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Great is thy faithfulness. darkness, you give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are
So here's what I was thinking about as we're singing that part that's like all the earth will shout your praise, that part. I think one of the reasons that line is both like at least powerful but then also challenging is because that's not what's currently happening. It's that we look at the world and we look at all the things that are happening and we're like, things are not the way they're supposed to be. Things are not as they should be, and it feels overwhelming, it feels sad, it feels scary sometimes. And it's not just the world out there, right? It's our lives. It's like we're looking at our lives and things are not what they're supposed to be. It's like, God, is this it? Is this all that there is? Is this really how things are going to be? Is it really how things are going to go? And so I think sometimes when we sing songs, like I think what I suspect is that for a lot of us, we're like, I'm supposed to be feeling this right now, and I'm supposed to like believe this. And it's like, sometimes, yeah, and there's some of you here who that's where you're at, and that's great. But I also just feel a heaviness because there's a lot of people in our church who are going through a lot of stuff right now. There are a lot of you in this room and you who are watching online who are going through a lot of stuff right now. And when we sing, all the earth will shout his praise, like it is like a declaration that what we are seeing right now is not all that there is. It is a choice to stare all of the sadness and all of the pain and all of the discouragement and all of the fear and all of the evil and all of it and look it in the eyes and declare that Jesus wins. It is not something that's just this nice sounding idea. It is a choice of bravery, of will for us to sing those words, declaring that they are true, even in the middle of evidence that suggests the opposite. And so what I want to invite us to do again is to sing that bridge again and sing it as like a way of declaring that evil does not get the last word, that sickness does not get the last word, that sin does not get the last word, that war does not get the last word, that relationships that are broken do not get the last word, that it does not get to win. Because all things in heaven and earth have been placed under Jesus' authority, and one day all things will be made new. So let's sing that together as a choice to declare that reality right now.
And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you
So, Jesus, we declare this morning that you are Lord, that you are in charge, that all things in heaven and earth belong to you. God, where we feel that, where we see that, we celebrate. And where we don't see it, and where we are hurting and struggling and wondering, we come to you. And we say, Jesus, come quickly. See your people. See your sons and daughters. Would your kingdom come, and would your will be done in this world, in our lives, in this church, just as it is in heaven. We pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Go ahead and grab a seat. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm glad that you're here. And wherever you are at in your spiritual journey, whether you've been doing this whole following Jesus thing for a long time, or this is your first time, or the first time in forever checking out God, Faith, Church, we're so happy that you are here. We want to let you know this is a safe place for you to take your next step toward God, whatever that next step might be. If you are visiting this morning, you're going to see a card on the seat in front of you. Grab that at some point in time this morning, fill that out, leave it on the seat. We'll grab it later. They'll just get you added to our email and text list, and then I would love to reach out this week as well and introduce myself, find out if there's any way I can help you get more connected here. So fill out the card, leave it on the seat. We'll grab it later. For everyone else, well, no, not for everyone else. For you and everyone else is how I should say that. Happy Thanksgiving, almost coming up. We are heading into that stretch run of holidays and busyness and all of that. And so for those of you who are watching online, who are traveling, I know there's a lot of families in our church who are out this weekend traveling, heading to see family. Hope that you are driving safe, and we will see you again here soon. I've got a couple of announcements for you this morning. First is this: next weekend after the service is our Christmas decoration time, where we're just going to stick around together, and as a church family we are going to decorate this building. If you have never seen what this building looks like when it's decorated for Christmas, it's pretty fun. And so it is a decent amount of work, and we would love your help. We will have pizza and drinks and, I don't know, other things of some sort, probably cookies, I would imagine. I bet there will be cookies. I'm not promising cookies, but there might be. And then we'll just kind of eat and hang out together, and we'll decorate this building, so please plan to stick around for that. And then the big thing that we are talking about right now is the Christmas store. If you are not familiar with what the Christmas store is, it's something we do every year. It's a place where families who are financially struggling during the holiday season can shop for gifts that are worth $25 or more, but cost only $5 each. And so it allows parents and guardians of kids to have the dignity of both picking out presents and paying for them, but at a highly discounted price. It is one of my favorite things that we do here, and we have set a goal this year of raising $25,000 in gifts. The whole point is that the families for each kid, they can shop for 2 gifts for each kid. That is going to add up to $25,000 this year. That's 500 kids, 1,000 gifts. And so we have been making progress toward that goal. Last week, I think we have that slide up there. Last week we were at $9,400. This week, next slide that we have up, we're at $13,429, and we've still, so we're on our way. And I know a lot of you guys brought gifts in this morning, so we'll put that thing up closer to 14.5, somewhere in there, which means that we've got a little over $10,000 to go, and we've got about 11 days to do it, y'all. And so the thing that I'm going to keep inviting you to do is the thing that I've been inviting you to do for the last few weeks, which is, first of all, if you haven't already, to go and buy gifts that are worth $25 or more across different age ranges. We always need especially gifts either for the older kids or the younger kids, and so you can focus on that. If you go to our website and go, right now if you go to the website, it's like front and center Christmas store, and just click on that. There's like a wish list of different things on there if you're looking for what you should buy. And then the second thing that I would say is this, is who do you know that you can invite to participate in the Christmas store as well, whether that's on social media, whether that's people in your neighborhood, whether it's sports teams, whether it's your school. He's not in here this morning, so I'll make an example of him. Kaylin, for those of you guys who know Kaylin Skoll, who's like 16? 15. Kaylin heard this pitch, and he's like, my school does like volunteer hours, and then there's also and basically he just went to the guy who runs all of that stuff at his school and asked whether his school could participate in that, and they wrote us a check for like $1,000, which is pretty cool. And so my point being is this, is like you have, like Kaylin, who's 15, has a network of people, and he utilized that to help promote the Christmas store. My question is, how can you do the same thing? Where are the areas that you can invite people to come and get involved in this? And like I've been saying for the last few weeks, it's not just that, not only does that help us then meet our goal, but the other thing that it does is this, is it invites people who might be in all sorts of different places in their spiritual journey to see the church in action. And I think this is one of the best things that the local church can do, is stuff like this. And they get to see that in action and participate in that. And that can be a very significant step in their spiritual journey as well. So my question is, is. Who can you invite? How can you reach out? What network do you have? How can you help us make up the next $10,000 as we're heading toward this? And then one last thing, because I think we're pretty much set on volunteers for the day of. If you'd like to volunteer, you still can. I think there's signups out there. But the other thing is this. One, we need help setting up the Friday before, so December 6th. So if you'd be up for that from about 2 o'clock on, we'll need help for that. And then, and this one's kind of exciting for some of you anyway, is we're probably going to need help shopping for gifts. And so if you've never done that before, like spending like $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 on gifts, $25 each, adds up to large carts that you are pulling through a store while people look at you real weird, and then you get to tell them what you're doing. It's so much fun. Seriously, it's so much fun. And I was doing the math in my head of that extra 5,000, like 25,000 instead of 20,000, and how much shopping still needs to happen. If you would be interested in doing that, come talk to me, and we can talk about how to go about the process of you shopping, and then we will just like reimburse you with the funds from the Christmas store. So there are some of you got so excited right now. There was a murmur in the room. This is wonderful. And so if you'd like to do that, come let me know. It's great. Okay, so I think that's it. Does that feel like it's it? Yeah, I mean, you don't know, but like, yeah, it feels like, cool, great. Okay, well, in that case, then stand. And as you stand, remember that we are not just a bunch of people who happen to be in the same room at the same time. We are people learning how to be a church family together. So find someone you don't know very well, have a conversation, get to know each other, be friendly. All right, we'll go ahead and start grabbing a seat. So we've been in this series called Every Second Counts, and sort of the theme of this series has been that there are these verses in the Bible that talk about this idea of like the moment to moment situations of our life mattering so much. And so it's going to say things like, I'm always meditating on your word, or pray without ceasing, or count it all joy, like in every circumstance, no matter what you're going through. And there's this idea that the moment-to-moment choices, the moment-to-moment focus of our life matters so much because it's turning us into a certain kind of person. And so on one hand, it's like the challenge of it, but then on the other hand, if you're like me, that feels pretty overwhelming and sometimes a little bit discouraging of like, well, how does anyone possibly do that? And so we are talking about how can we become people who are more aware of how every second matters, how every second counts, because God is at work in every second doing something in us, and we can partner with that. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that this morning, but before we do that, let's pray together. I'm just going to let us kind of hang out in stillness for just a second. The Bible says to be still and know that he is God. So let's just be still and be aware that God is here with us right now. As we settle in, just invite you to pray a very simple prayer. Just pray, God, would you speak to me this morning? And if you're not sure if God is there, if he'd want to speak to you, then just, God, if you are there, would you speak to me this morning? And then what my brain did just now as I was praying that prayer is it immediately started thinking about something that was like a distraction, an obstacle. Maybe for you, it's a concern or a worry or whatever. If there's something that would make it hard for you just to be able to be still right now and hear from God, I just invite you to hold that up to God. Literally imagine that you are holding that thing, that circumstance, whatever it is, up to God. And just being like, God, could you kind of take this so I don't miss whatever it is that you're wanting to do this morning? Or maybe what you need God to do is to take that. And so you would ask him that. And then would you pray for me? That God would speak through me this morning, that what I say would accurately reflect who he is. So, Holy Spirit, Spirit of the living God, speak this morning, move, encourage, comfort, challenge, convict. Give us what we need. Show us what our Dad in heaven is saying. And Jesus, all of this is centered around and for you. We pray all this in your name. Amen. So often, there's a gap between the person we know we should be and the person that we are, right? It's just me. Cool. So it's just me. I'm talking to me this morning. So for instance, we know sleep is important. We know that. But we still end up watching TV way too late. We know that eating small portions is important, but that pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, it's not that big. And there's only a little bit left? And honestly, wouldn't it be rude just to leave that little amount? Honestly, we should just eat it all, right? This is the stuff that we deal with, is that there's this gap between what we should do, what we know we should do, the person we should be, and then who we are. And I'm saying that because this morning we're talking about gratitude, and I've always found talking about gratitude to be tough. Because the problem isn't that we don't know that we should be grateful. This isn't something where I'm going to sit up here this morning and tell you something that you don't really know about gratitude. We all more or less know. The problem with gratitude isn't that we don't know that we should be doing it. The problem with gratitude is the doing of it. And you can hear that we know this. You can hear in our language, in our words, and how we talk to each other, you can hear that we know we should be grateful. We know, that's why the phrase first world problems exists. Is because we know we're supposed to be grateful. We know that we've all been ludicrously blessed, that we have so much, and yet we still complain all of the time. And one of the ways we get out of that is by saying, I know, first world problems. But then we keep complaining about how our venti soy triple shot latte had 3 pumps of caramel instead of 2, or whatever it is, you know? I got some of you. Oh, I got you. Yeah. I drink black coffee, so I don't know. That's your problem. All right. My point is, we know we're supposed to be grateful. You've probably even heard that being grateful is actually good for you. It's actually good for your health. If you haven't heard that before, buckle up for this quote. This is from Diana Butler Bass from her book titled Grateful. And she says this: gratitude promotes regular heart rhythms, rebalances hormones, reduces stress, increases relaxation, and promotes resistance to common illnesses. It has also been linked to emotional well-being, lower levels of anxiety and depression, decreased panic attacks and phobias, reduced risk of alcoholism and substance abuse, and longevity. In other words, grateful people live longer. We should be grateful. It is wired, literally biologically, for us to be grateful. We know that we should be like that. We know we should not be like the spoiled kids in Willy Wonka, a movie I am referencing for the second time in 3 weeks. I don't know why. That's not a relevant reference for me to be making. We know that gratitude is good for us. So why, for so many of us, is it so hard? And by the way, before I say anything else, I should stop and say it's not hard for everyone. Like for some of you, it's not hard. Some of you are just relentlessly positive people. I told him, he told me, oh, we're leaving Sunday and we're driving to go see family. And I'm like, well, you're going to miss out on something. And he's like, well, I'll watch online. We're going to find out if he actually watches online, y'all. So maybe it's because of your personality. Maybe it's because it's something that you've worked hard at. There are some of you here in this room. There really are. Some of you are just good at gratitude. And if that's you this morning, that's great. You can just hang out and be grateful about the fact that everyone else is learning about gratitude this morning. But for the rest of us, how do we do this? How do we be better at this? Because it's pretty clear in the Bible that this is something that if you're a follower of Jesus, that to be someone who is grateful or content, who's able to be in every situation and just sort of like see how it's going to be okay, or that how God is at work, to be able to see the good, that's something that we're called to do, to be about. Like, for instance, look at this passage. This is Philippians 4 by a guy named Paul, and he says this: how I praise the Lord that you're concerned about me again. And I know that you've always been concerned about me, but you didn't have the chance to help me. Not that I was ever in need, for I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. See, I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little, for I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. This, it seems to me, is sort of like the apex of gratitude, of what a grateful life looks like. This is the Platonic ideal. This is what uncut, 100% pure gratitude looks like, is that. This idea of like, no matter what is happening, it's having this genuine spirit of like, it's okay, I'm okay, it's going to be okay. Now, I've heard this passage talked about a lot, and usually the vibes of those sermons are something like Paul had gone through all these beatings, and this is real, like he'd gone through all these beatings and imprisonment and starvation and shipwrecks and all sorts of awful stuff, and if he was able to do that in his situations, then why can't you? Let's pray. And that was kind of the talk. And what that basically tends to turn into, and maybe you've been a part of religious cultures like this in the past, where it's like the religious cultures kind of develop this sort of like almost like creepy religious plastered smile on the face. It's like some sort of fakeness that's like really kind of like off-putting, where you kind of pick up early on that maybe if someone asks you how your day is going, there's one right answer. That answer is blessed. I'm blessed. Like I don't want to, that's like pod people behavior. I don't know how to deal with that. I'm just sort of like, are you there? Is there someone in there? What's going on? Yeah, pod people. Another very, very recent reference from a movie. The remake was in the 90s and the original was in the 70s. I'm old. And I want to be clear about something. When it comes to gratitude, that whole tangent was your fault, by the way, for you laughing and saying pod people. All right. When it comes to gratitude, the goal isn't to just grit our teeth really hard and hold tight and try to pretend. Like, that way of living sounds miserable. Because gratitude isn't something that we fake. However, gratitude is something that we can cultivate. If that sounds familiar to you, it's because I stole that from my talk this weekend last year. I think there's this idea out there that we are our feelings. That whatever we're feeling, that feeling is the most true thing. And that's like, it's something that's very deeply wired in me. I tend to be like that a lot. That my feelings are me. And what that tends to create then is an idea that we are either authentically grateful because we feel grateful, or we don't feel it, and so we don't even try, because if we were trying, that wouldn't be authentic. That would be fake. But here's what I want to say this morning. That's not how gratitude works. Gratitude is a feeling, but it is not only a feeling. That you can cultivate gratitude without faking it. And in this way, I would say that gratitude is actually quite a bit like love. For those of you who are married, how many of you, every single day, wake up and feel overwhelming romantic affection for your spouse? Oh, okay. Dee Dee's not there, bro. That's why you got away with that laugh. All right. Hopefully she doesn't watch won't be watching the stream. No, of course you don't. Like, do I wake up every single day and just feel overwhelming romantic affection for my wife? No. Does she for me? Absolutely. But you know what I mean though, right? Like, loving someone is often a feeling. Like, if it's never a feeling, then that's a problem. But loving someone isn't just a feeling. Loving someone is also a position that you take. Like, you can choose to foster a loving heart for people. You can choose to foster a loving heart toward your spouse. You can choose to serve them. You can choose to thank them. You can choose to appreciate them. You can choose to do things for them. You can choose to think of them first. You can choose to let them have the last cookie. And if they take the last cookie without asking you if you wanted it, you can not do the whole like, oh no, please go ahead, have the last cookie. You can just try to have a good attitude about it. No, I'm not thinking about something specific in my life. We cultivate love by choosing loving actions. And then the feelings, they come and they go around that. How does love in a marriage or in any sort of relationship die? It's not because people stop feeling love for each other. That's the misconception. What happens is that over time, people stop cultivating an environment where love can exist. They stop doing loving things. And when we stop acting in loving ways, it's like moving a plant out of sunlight. I'm saying all of that whole digression about love is to say it's the same with gratitude. We can cultivate gratitude in the same way that we can cultivate love. And you can actually see that in the passage that comes right before the one that we just read from Paul. These are the verses literally right before that. So in Philippians 4:6, we'll have this up on the screen. It's going to say this: don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for everything that he's done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and your minds as you live in Christ Jesus. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and that are worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all that you've learned and received from me, everything you've heard from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you. See, we can't read Paul's words that come a little bit later where he's talking about contentment. I've learned how to be content in all things. Go and be like that. Well, how do you do that? You do that from these verses before. Paul is able to be grateful in all situations because Paul has cultivated a life of gratitude. How? From that passage that we just read. Let's look at one example. Tell God what you need and thank him for all that he has done. For those of you who were here last week, you might remember this illustration that we'll have up on the screen here. It's a very expensive graphic illustration that we had. We talked last week about the idea of how we need to combine, like if our prayer life and our Bible reading feels a little bit stale, that sometimes the reason for it is because we've separated the two from each other, and that part of it is like learning how to combine them, where the way that we read the Bible then turns into our prayer. It's like, well, how do we do that? And then we use like a cheesy little acronym. It's like praise, respond, ask, and yield. If you're like, I want to know more about that, you can look at the live stream from last week, and the whole talk is about that. But I want to focus on those first two, this idea of praise and then respond. That what we talked about is that you read the Bible, the first thing you do is you look for, like, what are the things about God that I'm learning here? And we just turn those into, like, God, thank you for being like that. And then the second thing that we do is we respond and we ask, which is basically we reflect on the ways that we are living in that or not living in that. And then we ask God for the things that we need based on the characters of who he is. My point is this, is that when we do those things, when we get into a rhythm of regularly praising God, thanking God for who he is, and then asking him for what we need, that what that does is it starts cultivating gratitude in us. See, our interactions with God, they usually tend to highlight one of these two things. We either tend to focus entirely on saying all the right things about God, of like telling God all, like, oh God, you're so great. We tend to focus all of our time, everything we need, but we forget like to talk to him about what we're actually doing, what we're actually feeling, and what we're actually going through. Or we tend to spend all of our prayer time, and pretty much everything that we do is just asking God for every single thing that we need, but not focusing on who he is. And that when we bring both, and this is what Paul says in that passage, tell God what you need, thank him for what he has done, that we combine remembering who God is, remembering how he showed up, remembering how he's been faithful, and combining that with asking God for what we need. See, I think so often what prayer does and how prayer is connected to gratitude is like prayer, when we're really locked into it, what starts happening in prayer is that we allow God to meet us in our circumstances. We're honest with God about what we're going through. We talk to him about what we're going through, and that God meets us in those. But then God changes our perspective, and it's almost like he pulls us above what we are immediately experiencing and helps us to see the bigger picture. The day I was working on this talk was my day to pick up the kids from school, and both kids had had kind of a rough afternoon. And they wanted to like immediately rush home from school. And they were kind of, I could just feel it. You know vibes when you pick the kids up from school, you're like, the last 2 to 3 hours have not gone super well. Those are those kind of vibes in the car. It's like, nothing bad has happened yet, but bad is coming. I can feel it. And they wanted to like immediately like come home and like just jump into like playing and doing stuff. And I told them, I'm like, actually guys, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go spend like 15 minutes in your room. I want you to eat a snack and then just read quietly for a little bit. And like, we're just gonna try to hit the reset button and get you in a good space to have a good rest of the day. And one of my 2 children was not super pleased with my ideas. And he was like, I waited all day to come home, and now I have to wait to do the things that I want to do. And I don't always handle these moments great. I think I did this one kind of okay. And I was like, you know what, man, I get it. That makes sense. It's like, that makes sense. You've been spending hours trying to focus and like follow the rules and like be around other kids, and like you've been trying to like kind of hold all that together, and you're just ready to get home and release, and now you feel like I'm not letting you. That makes sense. But here's the deal, man. You need to take care of your body and just be still for a little bit. And if you can do that, it's going to help the rest of your day go really well. So just trust me. And then he did it. And guess what happened? He had a terrible rest of his day. No, I'm kidding. It actually went pretty well. Yeah, I'm a very good parent. Or my wife taught me how to do all these things. One of the two. Anyway, my point is that like so often with kids, when you're raising kids, I think so often like a lot of our role is to like meet our kids where they're at, to like intersect into their world, to try to understand what they're experiencing, but then to help them see the bigger picture of what's going on, and to trust in all of that our hearts are for them, that we're trying to take care of them. And I think that that's what prayer often is, that God both meets us in our circumstances. And this is something that a lot of us struggle with, the idea that God meets us and cares. He cares that we care. He cares that we're sad. He cares that we're tired. He cares that we're struggling. In the same way that, yeah, we blow it sometimes as parents, but I know you all. Like, you all care about what your kid is experiencing, and you want to meet them in that. And yet then God also, in meeting us in that, starts pulling us up to see the bigger picture. And what is the bigger picture? Well, that's that praise part. We start remembering who God is. We start remembering what God has done in the past. This is a big thing as a Christian, is the concept of remembering. We remember that time when we were really, really, really stressed out, and then it ended up being okay. We remember how God came through. We remember the way God provided that time in the past. We remember how we saw that our anxiety and fears, I'm stealing this from my therapist. We said our anxiety is a false prophet that is constantly predicting the future and getting it wrong. We remember that our anxiety and fears are false prophets, that they promised us a future that was going to happen, and that turned out not to be true. What did turn out to be true? That God was still good. Or, and this is just as true, we remember the times when things happened and they were things that we thought that we could never face. The worst happened. Our deepest fear of like, I would not be able to survive if blank. Someone got sick. Someone died. A spouse left. A relationship broke. You lost your job. And for some of you, you have stories that what happened in those moments was that God met you there in those moments. That He didn't abandon you. That in some of the worst things that you have experienced, what you have found is that at the bottom of life, you found God's goodness waiting for you there. We remember that we survived. And for some of us, it's not just that we survived, but we've gotten enough distance from those really bad moments that we can see how God actually brought good out of these terrible things, that somehow God brought good out of it. And I know some of you haven't gotten to that part of the story yet, but some of you have. That you would never, there are some of you here, and you would say this, I never, ever, ever, ever want to go through something like that ever again, but I would not trade the good that God brought out of it for anything in the world. And that's how we cultivate gratitude. We remember the good things that God has done. We remember how he held us through the worst things, and even not just held us, but how God brought redemption, how he brought beauty, how he took something horrible and somehow out of it. It's not that it wasn't horrible. The things that happened were still horrible. They were awful. They were tragedies, and yet somehow out of it grew something good. That there was new life on the other side of death, that there was new dreams on the other side of old dreams. And when we see that, when we look back, when we remember who God is, when we remember great is God's faithfulness. Why do we sing that? To remember and to think back and remember, like, God has been faithful. And I am putting my hope on the fact that he has not changed. That is where gratitude comes from, when we remember all of this and we say, I am grateful for where I am. I'm grateful for what I have. I'm grateful for the future, because no matter what, it's going to be okay. That's how Paul was able to have an attitude of contentment, of peace, no matter what. Not because he was delusional, but because Paul had seen and he had lived in the goodness of God. And here's what I want to say. Gratitude is not a denial of reality. Gratitude is the radical, faith-filled proclamation through action that there is more to reality than there seems. It is, and this is what we talked about when we were singing Great Are You, Lord, earlier. That when we say, it's your breath in my lungs, so I pour it out in praise, it is us choosing to do that. It is reorienting ourselves to say that we are choosing God to believe that the most true thing about reality is that you are good and that all of this world will be redeemed. When we root ourselves in the ways that we have seen that happen in the past, when we believe and root ourselves that that is the most true thing about life, that the most true thing about life is that there is a good God who is making all things new. When we do that, it cultivates it cultivates gratitude. And here's what happens. Whenever that gratitude starts getting cultivated in us, you know what happens? It starts creating generosity. That when we start becoming more focused on who God is, the next thing that'll happen is it starts freeing us to live generously. The reason I decided to land the talk on this point is because of something that happened this past week. There's this guy named Tony Campolo. Maybe a few of you know who he is. He is one of those guys who back in like the 90s was saying like, hey, maybe something with like the American church is a little bit off, and everyone got real mad. Like, he's a heretic. And then like 30 years later, like, yeah, maybe he was right. And he was in his 90s. He just died recently, just a few days ago. And so I knew him more by reputation than anything else. And someone online had posted like a clip from one of his talks, and it's this really moving story. I wish I could share. I'm going to save it because I have a feeling it will show up in a talk at some point in time in the future. But for this morning, I'm just going to say this. He told this really moving story about this time where God brought someone across his path and how he had this opportunity to just show like this radical generosity to this person. And it was like really moving. And he was a great storyteller, and it just like messed me up. And so it's like in my brain. And I'm thinking about that throughout the day. It's like the first thing I saw in the morning. And so it's just in my brain, and I'm thinking about it. And I start thinking about God's heart for people. I started thinking about how the church is supposed to be a place for the people who are the most lost, the most broken, the most hurting, the most ostracized, the most whatever. And I start it's just stirring something up in me. And there's this sense of like, God, I know that's who you are. It's one of the things I love most about who you are. I want to be a part of that. I want our church to be a part of that. Man, God, that's what I want in on. I'm like remembering who God is. And as I'm remembering who God is, it's stirring up this stuff in me, right? And so, that evening, it's like about 5 o'clock-ish, and I had to go to King Soopers to grab a few things before heading home. And so I in the store, get what I need, walking out to my car. I'm walking out to my car, and as I'm walking out to my car, there's like a woman who's like kind of walking the other way. She's probably about 10 feet to my left, and kind of like, like peripheral vision when you can tell someone just sort of stopped and like direction started turning. That started happening, and I hear this pretty soft voice being like, excuse me. And I turn around, I'm like, there's this woman, and she's like, hey, I was just wondering, could you help me with some food? I was wondering if that would be okay. And I'm just like, as she's doing it, I'm watching like a part of her die just by the fact that she's having to ask this in that moment. And I'm like, well, yeah, maybe. I'm like, well, what are you thinking? Like, and she's like, man, like, could you do like maybe just like some bread and some peanut butter or something like that? And I'm like, okay. I'm like, so like staples, like this is legit. Okay. Yeah, okay. Like, yeah, absolutely. And so I like put my stuff in my car. I'm like, let's go in. We're going shopping. Grab a grocery cart. I'm like, all right, what do you want? I'm like, apples and bananas. Those seem good. Do you like apples and bananas? You're like, yeah. I'm like, great. We're loading you up with as many apples as we can fit into this bag. There we go. And then she's catching on that maybe this is going to be more than like bread and peanut butter. And she's like, would it be okay if I got like a bottle of water? I'm like, yes, get a bottle of water. Get like the biggest bottle of water you can find over there. Please do. And then she's like, would it be okay? It's like on the day that this happened, it was like one of those days where it was like the wind picked up and it was so freaking cold. And she was like, hey, could I get like a hot meal from the deli? Would that be all right? I'm like, of course, get a hot meal. And so she's over there and she's like got like one of those styrofoam containers and it's like loaded up with chicken fingers and fries. And like as much of that's getting in there and like that thing's bulging around the edges. I'm like, love it. Great. Add that to the cart. And then we start going around. And I'm like, all right, let's get you some bread. Where's the peanut butter at? Took us a while to find the peanut butter. We got there, got some peanut butter, got some Cliff Bars along the way. And it's because the story that I'd heard from Tony Campolo that morning had been in my head of this moment where he had showed just went out of his way to bring joy to this person's life. I was like, we were walking past some Oreos and I stopped her. I'm like, do you want some Oreos? She like looked at me. I'm like, listen, whenever you're going through really hard stuff, I don't know about you, it's just helpful sometimes to have some comfort food. I'm like, sugar makes me feel better. Do you want some Oreos? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, great. We're throwing some Oreos in there. And then like we checked out, pulled the like $20 out as well, kind of put that in the bag for her. Walked her out, told her about the food bank that meets here every other weekend, told her about our church. I was like, hey, I'm a pastor. I don't think it's an accident that the one person that you happened to ask was a pastor of a local church. I think we should take that as God cares about you and maybe wanted you to know that he really sees you and he sees what you're going through and he cares. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I kind of lost sight of her pretty quick. I don't know where she, I was like, all right, God, it's up to you. You take this one. But I'm not sure if I would have stopped and been available if I hadn't seen that video that morning. It put me in this place. It got me in a mindset where I was remembering who God is. And as I'm remembering who God is, it's stirring up this longing and desire to participate in the story of who God is. Like, man, I want to be a part of a God who sees the people who need to be seen. Man, I want in on that. And there's this gratitude and excitement and this sense of purpose that's stirring up from that. And then as that's happening, as I am basically becoming someone who's available, God then brings this person into my life and I get to have that moment with her. And I'm saying that to say this, that the importance of gratitude, will that make your life better? Statistically, medically, apparently, yes, it will. And I want that for you. I don't want us to live in anxiety. If we can live in a place where we can be at peace because we believe in a good God who provides for his kids and that relieves some of our anxiety, then I want that for you, absolutely. But you know what I want even more? I want us to be the kind of church that loves generously and well and loves extravagantly because we're freed up to do so because there's a gratitude that has come from the way that we're experiencing God, and that gratitude is turning into a generosity to those around us. I think if we become people who are grateful people, not out of some sort of blind Pollyanna-ish, sort of another way outdated reference reality. But instead of like, I'm not talking about something naive. I'm not talking about living and like being delusional. I am talking about rooting ourselves in what is true about Jesus, even when all of life seems to be saying something different. Because when we start doing that and living like that, when we become like Paul, who can say, in all circumstances, I have learned how to live with contentment. Why? Because I trust that God is good. I have cultivated that in me. When we start doing that, we become people of generosity and love. And man, do I want to be a church that is centered around that. Wouldn't that be exciting? It's not just about you or me, is what I'm saying. When we cultivate gratitude, it creates a generosity and we become available and God starts to use us. I want in on that. Let's pray. And so this morning, I would just invite you to take whatever it is that has stood out to you, wherever you feel like God might be speaking, and for you just to have a conversation with God about that right now. Just go ahead and do that. And one of the obvious prayers is like, God, I want to be someone who's grateful and generous. And so maybe that's your prayer right now is, God, would you make me that kind of person and show me how to participate with you in becoming that kind of person? Maybe though, for some of you, you're like, God, this idea of like gratitude and generosity, it's like, I want that, sure, but right now I'm barely holding on. Right now, it's all I can do to just kind of wake up and keep going. And for you, maybe the prayer is, remind me, God, of the ways I've seen you work before so that I can believe that you're going to work now. Or maybe for you, the reality is that you have an abundance of good things in your life right now. But you've gotten so fixated on those good things that you've forgotten the generosity part. You've become, and like this sounds harsh, but there's an entitlement that's set in that all of this good stuff is something that you worked hard for. It's yours, or you're owed it. And because you don't see every good thing as a gift from a God who loves you, it has stifled generosity. And you just need to be like, God, I've gotten a little greedy. I've gotten a little kind of tight-fisted. It's like, would you stir up a gratitude in me for how good you have been in a way that releases me to be generous with my time, with my money, with my love. Let's stand together and let's sing.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest nights. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running
So as we leave, if you're up for it, hold out your hands to receive this blessing. As you enter a world of scarcity and fear, may you remember that God is good. He will provide you with all that you need. When you doubt that God is good, may you turn your eyes toward Jesus and see the fullness of who God is in him. When you're told to hoard your time and your money, may you give them extravagantly instead. When you're told to hate your enemy, may you remember that you are free to love them instead. May you remember that Jesus is not the property of any political party and that we are to love our neighbor, which includes those we passionately disagree with. And may you remember that you are a child of the King of this world and the next, that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is at work in you, and that where you go, the spiritual powers of this world must flee before the presence of the resurrected Jesus in you. So may you be filled with Holy Spirit. And may you shine brightly in your homes, at your work, and in your life. Claim these blessings over you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Have a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you all next week.